My name is Amalia. I'm 27 years old, living in a small town in northern Oregon, where the winters chill you to the bone, but the words spoken behind your back by your own family cut even deeper. 3 days ago, I received a video from my Aunt Clara. In it, my parents, the same ones who once held my hand and cried when I graduated college, were clinking glasses at a party, smirking as my mother said, "Amalia? She's just a freeloader. We poured all our money into her and she still acts like we owe her." I froze. They called me a burden, an ungrateful child, right in front of the whole family. And my sister, the one I once helped get a job, just sat there in silence, not saying a single word to defend me. Have you ever been betrayed by your own family? Thought you'd finally been accepted only to be stabbed in the back in the cruelest way? Tell me what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe if you want to walk with me through the truth they tried to bury for years. Because this story goes deeper and hurts more than that video ever could. I still remember clearly how it felt to stand in our crowded backyard during every holiday gathering, surrounded by people but feeling completely invisible. I grew up with one younger sister. Brianna, my sister, was the angel in everyone's eyes. Golden hair, bright blue eyes, always smiling like some child actress straight off the screen. Mom used to say, "Brianna was born to shine." Me. I stood at the sidelines quietly working. Since preschool, Mom had been taking Brianna to compete in child beauty pageants. I still remember the day she spent over $1,000 on a custom pastel pink princess dress just for Brianna, even hiring a makeup artist to come to the house. That same day, I sat in the kitchen folding laundry, wearing an old shirt with a frayed collar, while Mom shouted, "Amalia, your sister's about to go on stage. Don't get in the way." I wasn't jealous, at least I didn't think I was at the time. I found joy in books. While Dad drove Brianna to dance class or photo shoots, I stayed home devouring book after book. Ancient history, molecular biology, classic literature. I inhaled the pages like they were my personal escape, where I didn't have to be pretty or perform or please anyone. But no matter how tough I pretended to be, every time I heard Mom brag to the neighbors that Brianna had been chosen as the new face of the local bridal shop, and casually added that I'd probably end up being some sort of tutor or something, it pierced me. Every family party was like a never-ending performance. Dad would lead Brianna to the center of the yard, where she stood on a little wooden platform with blinking lights. She sang the latest pop songs, danced with practiced flair, ending with a perfect smile. The guests clapped wildly, lavishing her with praise. Mom would loop her arm through a guest's and beam, "She's got real talent. She'll be in Hollywood someday for sure." Me. I'd be in the kitchen setting out cookies, pouring soda, wiping down tables. If I dropped a glass, Mom's eyes would narrow. "Careful, Amalia. We have guests. Try not to be so clumsy." I'd quietly pick up the shards, only to overhear Aunt Rosa whisper to someone nearby, "That Amalia girl. Sweet kid but nowhere near as special as her sister." I pretended not to hear, but every word stuck to me like acid seeping in. By middle school, I joined academic clubs. I did my own experiments, wrote small research papers, and submitted them to statewide competitions. When I was 16, I won first prize at a regional science fair with a project on bacteria that could break down biodegradable plastics, something I'd researched all summer on my own. The school invited me to an awards ceremony in Salem, nearly a 2-hour drive away. I nervously handed the invitation to my mother. She glanced at it, then set it down on the table without a word. That evening at dinner, I brought it up again. "Mom, the ceremony's next Saturday. I need someone to come with me." She set down her spoon, voice cool and flat. "Saturday? That won't work. Brianna has her swimsuit pageant at the mall that day." It felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over my head. "But I won first place. I have to be there to receive the certificate or they'll cancel it." "Amalia," she cut in without looking at me, "that's not important. Who even cares about science awards? People remember the ones on stage, not the ones standing behind a science board." Dad nodded. "Your mom's right. Your sister needs to be there on time. No one has time to drive you all over the place." I stood up, gripping the letter in my hand. No one looked up. They just kept talking about blue evening gowns and curlers. That night, I locked my bedroom door, lay face down on the bed, and bit into my pillow until the seams split, just to keep from screaming. I didn't go to the awards ceremony. A classmate accepted the certificate on my behalf. Later, the principal mailed it to me. I taped it quietly to the wall between pages of formulas and hand-drawn graphs. No one in the house ever asked about it. High school passed in that same quiet ache. I was always top of the class, but not once did my parents drive me to school or show up to hear me present in any club. They were busy, they were always busy with Brianna. I started working part-time at the local bookstore, saving up for a used laptop and some academic textbooks. Once Dad saw me behind the register. He frowned and asked, "How much do you even make from this?" "Probably doesn't help much anyway." I smiled, saying nothing. Because even if I had answered, he wouldn't have listened. All those little wounds, each ignored word, every dream quietly dismissed, built up into something deep inside me. I didn't blame them. At least I taught myself how to survive without needing anyone. Still, on the quietest nights, I sometimes heard the question echo in my mind. If I had been a daughter they loved just a little more, would my life have turned out differently? I remember that afternoon like a burn that never fully heals. The sky in Oregon was slate gray, clouds so low they looked ready to crush the roof. I had just walked home from the post office, envelope in hand, stamped with the emblem of State Pacific University, one of the top 10 schools in the state. The envelope was thick, carefully sealed with bold blue letters. "Congratulations. You've been awarded a full scholarship." My hands were shaking as I opened it. The cold wind whipped at my collar, but all I felt was the heat rising in my chest. I had done it. After all those quiet years of study, all the times I reminded myself not to give up, I was finally seen. I ran home breathless, burst through the door and called out, "Mom, Dad, I got the scholarship. A full ride to State Pacific. I don't have to worry about tuition at all." My mother was trimming Brianna's nails at the dining table. She paused, looked up, and furrowed her brow. "Full ride? What do you mean?" I held up the letter like it was proof of a miracle. "I just need to pay the enrollment deposit, $1,500. Then tuition and housing are completely covered for all 4 years." Brianna squinted at me, glanced briefly, then returned to her phone. Dad walked in from the garage, wiping his hands with a rag. He gave me a look and asked, "$1,500? For the deposit?" I nodded eagerly. "I'll take on extra shifts to pay for books. I just need help with that initial deposit." The silence stretched so long, I could hear the ticking wall clock in the kitchen. Mom set the nail clipper down and sighed like I had just asked for the impossible. "Amalia, we're sorry. But that money, it's gone." I blinked. "Gone? But the savings you said were for college." "It went to Brianna," Dad said flatly. "She's about to start at the Beauty Institute in Los Angeles. Tuition, housing, registration fees. Everything had to be paid right away." I froze in place. "But what about me? This is my dream school. It's a full scholarship. This chance, it won't come again." Mom turned to me, her voice not unkind but cool and entirely logical. "You have to understand, Brianna has a real shot at changing her life. That school connects with major studios. She could become a celebrity makeup artist. Our family needs to invest where the outcome is clear." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What about me?" I asked. "I was the top student in my class for 4 straight years. I won a statewide science award. Don't I deserve a chance too?" My father furrowed his brow, like he was already tired of the conversation. "Don't you get it, Amalia? You're good, we're not denying that. But what are you going to do with that degree? Business administration? You think someone's going to hire you right out of college? Brianna has the potential to be famous, to land contracts the moment she graduates. We're not a wealthy family, we have to invest smart." I felt my chest tighten. Every explanation I had rehearsed, every hope I held that if I just laid things out clearly, the fact that this was a full-ride scholarship, that I only needed one shot to prove myself, it all collapsed into dust. "So what you're saying," I whispered, my voice breaking, "is you were never planning to let me go. You never intended to support me." My mother didn't answer. She simply turned to Brianna and said, "She's being overly sensitive again." I broke down right there in the middle of the living room. I cried like the whole world had fallen apart. After all those years of being overlooked, brushed aside, ignored, I had still hoped. Still believed. And this was the answer. "Please, Mom. Please just lend it to me. I swear I'll pay it back. Every single dollar." No, Amalia, my father said firmly. The decision's been made. And don't be selfish. Your sister is the future of this family. I ran to my room and slammed the door shut. I screamed into my pillow until it was soaked with tears. I don't remember how long I lay there. Only that when I sat up, the sun had set and the room felt cold and hollow like a locked cell. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. I put on the uniform from the small diner down the street, the one where I worked weekend shifts, and left the house without a word. While my classmates stepped through the gates of their universities, I pushed open the back door of a greasy kitchen, where the heat and smell of oil welcomed me like some unwanted fate. That was the beginning of long days scrubbing dishes, mopping floors, hauling plates, getting yelled at by customers and barked at by managers. Every night, I curled up with that crumpled scholarship letter clutched to my chest, wondering if I had been born as Brianna, would they have said no so easily? I can't remember exactly what got me through those months, willpower or fury. Some nights I sat behind the dishwashing station, hands raw from hot water, ears ringing from the sound of slammed plates, and my heart colder than the metal sinks. I barely spoke to anyone. Just small talk when needed. I stopped going home early. After work, I would wander the empty streets, looking at the warm lights in strangers' houses, wondering if there was any place in this world that could ever feel like mine. And it was on one of those nights that I saw Aunt Claire again. She was behind the cashier counter at the old bookstore on 5th Street, the one I used to visit once a month to buy discounted books when I was still in school. I hadn't planned to go in. But when her eyes met mine through the foggy glass, she immediately waved me in. Amalia? She stepped out from the counter, her voice soft and slow like the turning of a page. Good heavens, what are you doing in this part of town at this hour? I shifted, avoiding her gaze. I was just taking a walk after work. Where do you work? The Mexican diner. 12th Street. I'm on kitchen duty. She stared at me for a long moment. I said nothing more. She didn't press. She just quietly unlocked the door and said, "Come in and sit for a bit. It's cold." I don't remember everything I said that night. I probably stayed quiet more than I spoke. But I remember the warm yellow glow of the bookstore, the smell of old pages, the ticking clock, and the cinnamon tea Aunt Clara placed in front of me. And I remember crying. She didn't ask. Didn't give advice. Didn't pity me. She just sat beside me, placed her hand gently over mine and said, "I've been watching you all along. You didn't deserve any of that." I buried my face in the table and cried like a forgotten 8-year-old on a playground. A few days later, Aunt Clara invited me to dinner at her house. She lived in a small home in the suburbs, surrounded by a faded wooden fence and a blooming rose garden, still thriving despite the late summer heat. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon, cozy and unnervingly neat. While I was still awkwardly standing in the entryway, she set 2 plates of spaghetti with tomato sauce on the table and poured tea, then said softly, "You can stay here. If you want." I looked up thinking I misheard. "What did you say?" "I have a spare room. This house is too big for one person. And I have some savings, been setting them aside for retirement. If you need, just consider this your home." I sat there speechless. Not because of the offer, but because of the sincerity in her voice. No strings. No conditions. No calculations. But I don't want to be a burden. She smiled. A tired but warm smile. You think living alone for 30 years hasn't felt like a burden? I'd be glad to have someone drop a spoon in the hallway or blast music too loud. At least it reminds me I'm still alive. I threw my arms around her and burst into tears. For a moment, it felt like every bitter weight I'd carried for years had been lifted from my chest. After moving in with Aunt Clara, I quit the diner and applied to a nearby community college. With my old grades and a recommendation from a former teacher, I was accepted into a business administration program. Aunt Clara paid for my first semester and bought me a used laptop. I promised her I'd make it count. She just nodded. "I don't need you to repay me. Just don't give up." Each morning I took the bus to class. Each night I cleaned the house, watered the garden, and studied at the small table by the window. Aunt Clara would quietly bring up tea, say nothing, and slip away. Every small act made me feel seen, not as Brianna's shadow but as a real person. Within a year I got into the honors program and then transferred to a 4-year university on a merit scholarship. My family never knew. Aunt Clara and I agreed to keep it a secret. She said, Not because we're afraid, but because we don't need them defining who you are anymore. I nodded. I understood. And I was grateful. I didn't rise by shouting or demanding. I rose quietly, piece by piece. With every late-night study session. Every silent victory over shame. Every gentle word from the one person who saw me even when I couldn't see myself. My uprising wasn't loud, but it ran deep. And it started with Aunt Clara reaching for my hand and pulling me out of the pit my own family had thrown me into. I graduated on time with honors. My name went up on the university's dean's list. At the ceremony, I stood on the stage and looked down at the audience, where Aunt Clara sat with teary eyes and a bouquet of hydrangeas in her lap. No one else from my family was there. No calls. No messages. But just having her there made me feel more celebrated than any party they'd ever thrown for Brianna. 1 month later, I received an offer from a luxury restaurant group specializing in Pacific Northwest cuisine. They were hiring for an operations assistant manager at their Portland branch. I applied, walked into the interview with sweaty palms, and 3 weeks later I held the official contract in my hands. The starting salary was beyond anything I imagined. I called Aunt Clara. She teared up, squeezed my hands, and simply said, "I'm proud of you." Less than 6 months later, my photo was on the cover of a local magazine with the headline, "The Quiet Young Woman Transforming Portland's Culinary Scene." The article called me a symbol of resilience, a woman who had climbed from the margins to claim her place in the world. That article brought my family back. That afternoon, just before my evening shift, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. It was my mother's number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Amalia, sweetheart. I just saw your picture in the paper. So beautiful. We always knew you'd make it. The whole family's coming over Sunday night. Why don't you join us for dinner? It's been too long." I stood there silent, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. "Your father's been dying to see you and congratulate you. Everyone's going to be so surprised." I didn't respond right away. A few seconds dragged on like hours. Finally, I exhaled softly and said, "I'll think about it." That evening, I told Aunt Clara everything over dinner. She set down her chopsticks and looked at me like she could read my entire soul. "You can go if that's truly what you want," she said gently. "But don't let anyone pressure you into playing a part you no longer believe in." On Sunday evening, I wore a modest beige dress, tied my hair back neatly, and brought a box of almond cookies I had baked myself in the restaurant kitchen. I didn't expect anything, and I wasn't prepared for any apologies. I just wanted to see, after all these years, what kind of look they'd give me now. The old house hadn't changed much. That familiar cooking smell drifted from the kitchen. When the door opened, my mother hugged me tightly as if nothing had ever happened. "You're back. Look at you, you're glowing. My little Amalia has made it." My father shook my hand and gave my shoulder a hearty pat. "Well done. You've made the Brooks name proud." I nodded silently, lips curved into a polite smile. In the living room, a few relatives sat around the table, red wine in hand, laughter filling the air. My sister Brianna stood near the window, holding a little girl about 2 years old. She nodded at me, her smile barely there. Dinner revolved around me. They kept bringing up how smart I was in school, then smoothly shifted into talking about how the family always supported me wholeheartedly. My mother even laughed loudly, telling everyone, we always encouraged her to chase her dreams, no matter how tough it got. I nearly choked on my vegetables. "Tell us more," my mother turned to me. "About your journey from school to the company and the magazine too. Be sure to mention that the family was always right there with you." That part was missing from the article. I put my chopsticks down. Brianna stayed silent, eyes drifting away. I felt Aunt Clara's gaze from the far end of the table. She didn't say a word, just calmly took out her phone, set it on her lap, and hit record. I began, voice low and steady, "I can't tell a story that isn't true." The mood dipped. My mother gave a nervous laugh. "What do you mean by that?" I was never taken to my college orientation. I was never congratulated when I earned my scholarship. I never once heard my parents say, "We're proud of you," until today. My mother's hand tightened around her wine glass. "Amalia," she started. "I'm not blaming anyone," I continued, eyes steady. "But don't ask me to pretend I grew up in a warm, supportive home. I don't need to be polished into someone else's version of a happy story." No one spoke. The room was as still as if all the air had been sucked out. Aunt Clara remained seated, unmoving as her phone quietly captured everything. I stood, gave a small nod. "Thank you for dinner. I need to go." I walked past the living room out of the house I once called home. But this time I carried no tears with me. Only the truth. And that was enough to help me breathe again. 3 days after that dinner, life slipped back into its usual rhythm. I started my morning shift at the restaurant with a clean apron, a reservation list in hand, and my mind focused on scheduling weekend events. I didn't dwell much on what had happened. Not because I'd forgotten. It just felt safer not to drown in the lingering emptiness that followed that night. I had no idea that earlier that morning, a video less than 2 minutes long had begun circulating across local social media, posted on Aunt Clara's Facebook page. The first clip showed a moment from the dinner when my mother stood up with a beaming smile, glass raised, her voice full of pride. "We've always supported Amalia, ever since she learned to read." Then came my calm, resolute reply. "I was never taken to my college orientation. I was never congratulated when I earned my scholarship. I never once heard my parents say, 'We're proud of you,' until today." The clip ended with me standing up and walking away from the table. No one stopped me. But that wasn't all. In a second video, also posted by Aunt Clara shortly afterward, she had secretly recorded a moment in the kitchen while I had stepped into the restroom. My mother was speaking to one of my aunts. "What's she good at, really? Just lucky to get our family genes. Nothing special. And now she's acting ungrateful, mouthing off in front of everyone. That girl won't get far." My father stood nearby, holding a glass of wine, nodding. "Told you raising her was a waste. That bookworm thinks she's better than us. Like we didn't give her life. Now she talks back under our own roof." Soft chuckles from others in the background. No one objected. Not one person. Aunt Clara didn't add any commentary. She simply captioned the post with one quiet line: "If you're going to build a story, at least live by it." That morning, as I was watering the little plant in the corner of the manager's office, a coworker stopped by, half joking, half serious. "Amalia, you're going viral. Have you seen it?" I looked up, frowning. "What?" She handed me her phone, showing me the video that had already been shared over 300 times in under 12 hours. I watched, speechless. Then she swiped to the second video. My face burned, my heart pounding like a drum. My fingers trembled as I handed the phone back. "I didn't know. My aunt posted those." She gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to explain. Anyone who watches knows who's right. I feel for you." I stepped into the break room, closed the door, sat down on the wooden bench against the wall, knees pulled up, hands cradling my head. What I felt wasn't anger. It was shock and pain and shame mixed with something I couldn't even name. I didn't blame Aunt Clara. I understood why she did it. But seeing those words come out of the mouths of the people who once held me, fed me, taught me to say Mom and Dad, it didn't feel like being stabbed. It felt like someone had smashed every good memory I had and hurled the pieces back in my face. Within hours, my phone buzzed with dozens of messages. A former classmate texted, "I used to think your family always had your back because you were so kind. Now I understand why you had to do everything on your own." A longtime customer left a comment on the restaurant's Facebook page. "I've known Amalia since she was just a junior staff member. Seeing that video makes me respect her even more." I read every line, tears slipping down my hands without me realizing it. That afternoon, my phone rang nonstop. Mom's number. I didn't answer. Then Dad's. Then Brianna's. I ignored them all. Then came the texts. "Mom, Amalia, I never imagined Clara would betray our whole family. Don't believe everything online. Dad, who allowed filming in my house? I could sue. Brianna, you're taking this too far. You want to publicly shame the whole family now." I read them but didn't respond. I powered off my phone, unplugged the charger, and lay back on the break room bench. The door stayed closed. No one knocked. I thought about Aunt Clara. And for a brief moment I felt a little less cold inside. Because even if the world kept pretending, there was still one person who stood up, quietly captured the truth and let it speak for itself. I sat on my bed, my phone face down on the wooden table by the window. The screen kept lighting up, flashing missed calls and a stream of new messages from the same names I once thought of as family. Dad. Brianna. Aunt Rosa. Uncle Harold. It was as if they had suddenly remembered I existed. Remembered that I still had a phone number they never bothered to use during all those years I lived in silence. I tapped the screen and opened the messages. Mom, I didn't know you were so petty. Every family says things they don't mean sometimes. Dad, who do you think you are, airing out your parents on the internet? You better remember, without us you wouldn't even exist. Mom, again you've shamed this family. What's left of the Brooks pride? Brianna, you ruined everything. I can't even step outside without people looking at me like I'm a criminal. I need you to get me a job at your company. I need to restore my reputation. I set the phone down without replying to a single one. That night, I stood in the living room of the old rental apartment I used to call my sanctuary. The corner of the dining table where I once studied until 3 in the morning. The olive green sofa where Aunt Clara used to sit knitting scarves for me. The shaggy rug in the center of the room was the first birthday gift I ever bought myself with my intern wages. Every item breathed traces of the past, of missed dreams and days I laughed while clenching my jaw just to keep from crying. I had lived too long in the shadow of my family, in the fear of disappointing someone, of having to be proper, to know my place, to keep the peace. But now I had one thing left to do: break free. I went online and looked for a small apartment on the west side of the city, farther out, but with natural light, white walls, hardwood floors, and a little balcony that overlooked a row of tall green poplars. I put down the deposit that same day. Claire helped me pack. Every time I folded a shirt or took a picture down from the wall, I felt a little lighter. She didn't ask many questions. She just quietly packed alongside me as if she understood that some wounds don't need bandages. They just need to be far from what made them bleed. When the moving truck pulled up to the new apartment, I stepped out onto the balcony and took a deep breath. The air felt different. Gone was the musty smell of the old house, the cracked walls, and the fake family photos I had once hung to fool myself. It was just me, a blank space, and a new chapter waiting to be written. I changed my phone number. Turned off all notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and my personal email. I blocked every familiar contact one by one. Every tap of my finger felt like cutting a cord that had silently bound me for 27 years. It wasn't that I didn't hurt, but the hurt no longer drowned me. It was just an old scar that didn't bleed anymore. A quiet reminder that I had once existed in a place where no one really saw me. A few weeks later, I ran into Brianna in a parking lot behind a food fair. She wore an oversized hoodie and was carrying a small child in her arms. Her face was pale, her lips colorless. When she saw me, she stopped. "Sis," she said softly, her voice barely louder than wind brushing through dry grass. I didn't reply. I just looked at her. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I wasn't sure what I was hoping to feel from those words. I had waited years to hear them. When I lost my scholarship, when I scrubbed dishes to survive, when I cried alone in that little room no one from my family ever stepped foot in. But hearing it now, all I felt was emptiness. "I need work," Brianna continued. "Not for money, but because if I don't get back on my feet, my little girl won't have a place to go to school. No one will hire me. Everyone says I'm a freeloader." I looked into her eyes for the first time in years. There was no arrogance, no flashy red lipstick, no smugness. Just a single mother clinging to the last bit of hope for her child. I said nothing. I didn't nod. I made no promises. I just walked away, leaving behind the worn-out shadow of a time when I was erased from my own family. And in that silence, I realized I had finally done what no one ever taught me. I had chosen myself. Finally, after all those relentless years, my hard work and perseverance were being rewarded in ways I never expected. One beautiful morning, while preparing for a major meeting at the corporate headquarters of our restaurant group, my phone rang. The screen lit up with the name Mr. Stevens, the chief executive officer who had worked for over 30 years and someone I deeply respected. I answered with a flutter in my chest. He invited me to his private office, warm and lined with serene green landscape paintings. He smiled, eyes kind but steady, his voice low and decisive. "Amalia, I'll be retiring at the end of this year. I've thought long and hard about who should succeed me as regional director." My heart pounded in silence. "That person," he continued, "is you. You've shown the kind of dedication and capability that's rare to find. I want you to take over operations and strategic development for all the regional branches. A wave of emotion surged through me. I struggled to keep my composure. His eyes sparkled like he understood every ounce of what I had been through. "Thank you so much," I said, my voice shaking. "I won't let you down." He smiled and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I believe in you." Leaving his office, I couldn't hold back my tears. A mix of joy, gratitude, and a deep longing to tell Aunt Clara rushed over me. I called her on video right away. "Auntie," I choked, "I've been appointed regional deputy director." She smiled on screen, eyes glistening. "I always knew you would. I'm so proud of you." In that moment, I thanked her silently for being the one person who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. Without her, I wouldn't have made it here. The appointment ceremony was held in a grand conference hall, attended by the entire executive team and staff. When I stepped up to speak, my heart pounded. I hadn't forgotten the one person who taught me about perseverance and unconditional love. I invited Aunt Clara to join me on stage. Holding her hand, I said to everyone, "Without Aunt Clara, I wouldn't be standing here today. She gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. She believed in me when the world turned its back. And she taught me that no matter how hard life gets, we can always stand tall on our own feet." The room erupted in applause. I looked at her and saw that warm smile on her face. That was the moment I knew I had won, not just at work but in life. I stood there not just as a newly appointed regional director, but as someone who had walked out of the dark into the light through strength and real love. I knew the road ahead would still be long, but with Aunt Clara and the lessons I had learned, I would never walk it alone. One misty fall afternoon, while I was finishing reports for the upcoming weekend meeting, a soft knock sounded at my office door. I glanced at the clock, nearly an hour before the end of the workday. I was surprised. Very few people knew where I worked. Opening the door, I found Brianna standing there. She looked thin, her clothes wrinkled, cradling a tiny sleeping child wrapped in a light blanket. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes telling of sleepless nights and heavy worry. I stood in silence, and before I could speak, she choked up. "Sis, I have no one left. Mom and Dad abandoned me. They don't care about me or even ask about the baby." Her voice trembled with fatigue and dried tears. A chill ran down my spine. My whole childhood, the pain and hardship, seemed to rise all at once, pressing into a space in my chest I'd never dared admit was still sore. She continued, "I'm not asking anyone for money. I just need a job. Cleaning, assisting, whatever I can do as long as I can support my baby and stand on my own." I looked into her eyes and saw a genuine plea, stripped of all pride or entitlement. She had changed deeply. The silence between us stretched so long it felt like time had stopped. I remembered her once being cradled by the family's love, spoiled and protected, and now, falling from grace, standing at my door not as a sister asking, but as a mother begging for a chance. "Why should I help you?" I asked gently, not with anger but as if I needed to understand. She looked down and let out a weary sigh. "I know you might hate me. I know you might not trust me. But I really want to change. I've failed too many times already. This is my last chance. If you help me, I won't let you down." I placed my hand on her shoulder and felt her trembling. "All right. But under one condition. You have to really try. There's no room for failure this time. This is your last chance, Brianna." My voice was firm. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks, but her eyes were filled with determination. I called human resources and requested a job for her. A janitorial position at the restaurant. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a first step toward a new life. I told her I would help her gain more skills so she could move up if she stayed committed. On her first day, I stood at a distance and watched her clean, wipe down tables. Her eyes were much brighter than they were the day she stood at my office door. I smiled quietly to myself. I knew the road ahead would still be long and hard, but it was an honest one she needed to walk herself. And I also knew that forgiveness wasn't always easy, but offering a chance wasn't beyond me. I chose to give both of us something we'd never truly had, a new chance to heal and begin again. That night, I sat by the window in my office, looking out over the city shimmering with lights. My thoughts wandered back to everything we'd been through, to the ones who had hurt me and hurt her too. But I also thought about the power of patience, compassion, and the belief that people can change. I knew life would never be perfect, but I promised myself I would do everything in my power to make it better. for me, for my sister, and for that little girl who needed a brighter future more than anyone else. After years of relentless effort, my story was finally acknowledged in a way more meaningful than any compliment I had ever received. I was overwhelmed when I saw my name for the first time on the cover of the prestigious Women in Business magazine. Standing beside me in the photo was Aunt Clara, the woman who had given me a home, given me faith, and given me a real chance to change my life. The photo of us standing together, gentle smiles on our faces and eyes filled with the light of battles we had survived, spread rapidly on social media and throughout the local business community. The story of a girl abandoned by her family, who rose on her own and became one of the most promising young executives in the restaurant industry, became a source of inspiration for many. I remembered those years of hardship, those moments I wanted to give up but was pulled back by Aunt Clara. The nights I spent studying at the dining table under a dim yellow lamp, fighting for a future not to prove something to anyone else, but simply to live in alignment with my own worth. On the stage at the awards ceremony, standing before hundreds of admiring eyes, I felt my heart beating in rhythm with so many others who were listening. I didn't say much, just one simple and honest sentence. I'm not a perfect daughter. But I've learned the most important thing: real love never comes with conditions. The applause that followed was long and warm, not just for me but for anyone who had ever suffered, been abandoned, or had to carve their own path back to standing tall. My biological family, the ones who turned their backs, were now gone from my life. But I had built a new family not from blood, but from true love and mutual respect. Aunt Clara wasn't just an aunt. She was my mother, my friend, my guiding light in the darkest nights. Along with the friends, colleagues, and loved ones in my new life, I had found the warmth I once longed for. I realized that happiness doesn't come from waiting for someone to accept or love you. It's a journey of learning to love yourself, to walk confidently forward, and to keep working toward your dreams. Each morning when I wake up, I still remember the hard days, but they no longer weigh me down. I'm grateful for the past, because without it I would have never discovered my true strength. Life handed me many steep hills, but I chose to rise, to forgive, and to continue loving in my own way. I don't need to be perfect in anyone's eyes. I just need to be me, a resilient, free, and hopeful Amalia. My story is not rare. There are so many out there quietly enduring, trying to move past pain caused by the very people they trusted most. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced or witnessed something like this? What are your thoughts on the power of love and forgiveness in family? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Because real stories only grow stronger when they're heard and understood. If you enjoy heartfelt, meaningful stories like this one, about life, family, and the journey toward healing, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.